Okay, so here we are with Dr. Bradley Roof performing our cross-examination as a defense. So to start off, Dr. Roof, how long have you been teaching at JMU?
Many years.
Many years?
Yes.
Could you put an exact
Many
number on
years. Less than 50, but more than 37.
that? Okay. Okay, so is that how long it's been since the 4 years of public accounting experience you have?
Mm-hmm. Well, that I was full-time in public.
That you were full-time in public accounting, yes. And what is the extent of your experience in relation to fraudulent accounting?
I've never done forensic accounting.
Forensic accounting?
Right.
Okay.
The only experience that I specifically had with fraud was I had one audit in which I discovered an employee embezzlement.
Okay. Thank you. And then in the past year, how often have you worked with firms in the part-time basis that you explained to
One
us?
in the last year.
One in the last year. Okay.
And that was on a complex transaction.
And so in your experience, you said you had a lot of experience with employee retention programs. How frequently would you say that auditors get hired away by their clients from the audit firms?
Well, it's one of the principal ways in which firms get new business or retain clients. In other words, if they hire, it's not uncommon at all for people to hire even staff people away from audits, so that they get to see them work, they get to know what kind of person they are, and when they hire them, they already know their business to a great degree. So it's a common thing that happens.
So very common. Okay. How likely would you say it is that an auditor would discover fraud with a high level of management collusion and engagement, a regular financial statement?
Yeah, well, the answer to that is it depends. In other words, the more collusion there is with any type of fraud, the more difficult it might be to discover. There's no doubts about that. What tends to work on the auditor's side, though, is the more material it becomes, the easier it is to discover, because it's the auditors out there trying to determine the fairness of the financial statements. And as the financial statements become less fair as a result of the fraud, it's more likely that the auditor should discover it.
Yeah.
All right, is what happens. Particularly in situations where the nature of the fraud is covert, meaning it's not that something's kept off the financial statements. It's where there's something on the financial statements that's there for the auditor to examine. In other words, that there's some evidence there, like a piece of thread that the auditor can grab a hold of and start pulling.
Okay. Is it possible for the auditor to be defrauded by the auditee, even if the audit procedures and materiality have been changed over the years? That's just a yes or no.
Well, I mean, audit procedures can change any time. All right, that can happen. But the issue of whether you're going to be defrauded isn't the issue of whether they change or not. It's, are they adequate in the circumstances? So in other words, do the audit procedures match the nature of the engagement and the types of risk that you take to financial reporting?
Okay, so in your examination with the prosecution, you said that for all you know that employees could walk out with the whole audit program in reference to employees going from an audit firm to a client. So you're stating there's a possibility that the auditors that went to Health South from Ernst & Young could have walked out with the Health South audit program?
Yeah, absolutely. You may be able to make safeguards in the software. For example, you might have an audit program where you might not be able to print it, or you might not be able to copy it. It might be a read-only file, something like that. But it doesn't mean that everybody in the engagement doesn't have an opportunity to sit there and take pictures of it with their smartphone.
Yeah.
It's quite possible that would happen. And as employees leave and go to the firm, you have to recognize that that's a potential risk.
And
if it isn't,
isn't it true that
well, just saying, even if it isn't the audit program, it's just that if the longer somebody's on the job and gets attracted to that client, the more just intuitive knowledge they have and memory they have associated with what the nature of the audit is.
True. So isn't it true that the audit firms have strict documentation standards, especially in regards to document turnover or disposal? And we talked about that, and you'd say yes.
Well, yeah, absolutely. In other words, the audit program is not the property of the individual people that work for the company. It's the property of the firm.
So walking out with the audit program, you would say by an employee would be an illegal act, and it would show lack of integrity and poor moral values by by that employee, correct?
Well, the taking
Yes.
of the audit program itself would probably be a tort, not a crime.
Mhm.
Meaning, if they took it and there was, and in some way it was used for the benefit of the individual when their agreement was that it wouldn't, say for example, to use it in a magazine article or to use the audit program in a training program that after they left the firm, then probably that would be an illegal use, but it's not necessarily criminal. It would be a tort.
You would say these people have a lack of integrity and poor moral values.
Well, of course.
And do you believe the management of Health South, including the CEOs, CFOs, all exemplified this same lack of integrity and poor moral values?
Well, that wouldn't be my judgment. I would rely on the judgment of others. Certainly those that pleaded guilty to felonies, you'd have to assert that they were.
That would be true. And that's all we need you for. Thank you for your
That's
time.
it? Okay.